Let's see, I'm reading from Acts chapter 11, verse 26. And when he had found him, he brought him unto Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church, and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. The disciples were called Christians. The disciples were called Christians. They were disciples. They were called Christians. They were not Christians who became disciples. They were disciples who were called Christians. We have this title of Christian that goes ridiculously off base. Um, are you a Christian because your parents were Christian? Are you a Christian because you do Christian things like go to church or give clothes to those who need it? Are you a Christian? That term has so many different connotations. You know, when someone says I'm a Christian, I don't know what that means. When someone says they're a disciple of Christ, though, that's plain. That means that I am studying Christ and I want to be like Christ. That's what it means to be a disciple. Every single believer who is really a believer becomes a disciple. Anyone who believes and does not become a disciple, meaning that they don't take his yoke and learn of him, maybe that's what a Christian is. Maybe they're just someone who knows about Christ, who studies the things of Christ and does some of the nice things of Christ. You know, they pick the, well, he fed the hungry, so I should feed the hungry kind of mentality. But the reality is, if you are a disciple of Christ, then you want to grow up into an image of Christ, to the point where people can't tell the difference between you and Jesus, except by the name and the position of being Son of God. You will never be Son of God. I will never be Son of God. I will never be those Jesus. I will never be Jesus. If you think you are Jesus, they have medication for you and a rubber room and lots of doctors and nurses who will be nice to you. We can only hope to be disciples of Christ. Disciples means we study him and we begin to learn to have the same internal strength that he had. Where did his internal strength come from? Knowing who he was. Other people perceive that as arrogance. Other people perceive that as pride. Other people perceive that as all kinds of things because they don't want to accept the truth that Jesus is the Son of God. He's 100% man and 100% God. They don't want to accept that, and so they keep picking out other things that they can do. I'm a disciple. I have every intention of dying for Christ. I have every intention of of people becoming angry because I'm challenging the status quo. I don't care. I don't care. This life is only an opportunity for us to be strong, to allow God to show himself strong through us. I don't have to be perfect in terms of other people's opinions. I don't have to be perfect even in my past. I don't have to be perfect even in my present. I don't have to be perfect. I have to be holy and I have to be righteous. Holiness and righteousness is imputed. That means it's given to us by being disciples of Christ. By being a disciple, I'm already righteous. By being a disciple, I'm already holy, and I'm already seated in heavenly places. Just by being a disciple, that's not something I have to earn. That's something God gives me. So I have it because God gave it to me. So now that I have it, I have to live up to the standard that God has set for me. It doesn't mean I'm already there. It means that the standard is not going to change. And if I love God every day, I am moving towards living up to the standard that God has set for me. Jesus is the standard. Creflo Dollar's not the standard. TD Jake's not the standard. Jonathan Falwell, Jerry Falwell. No, nobody. Any really righteous person you can come up with, really nice person you can come up with, the sweetest, nicest, kindest Mother Teresa type person in the world, anyone that you think is a good person, uh, none of them is the standard. Jesus is the standard. That's a much higher standard. And every time we lower that standard, we cheat ourselves out of being able to reach the point that God is taking us to. We need to be stronger. We need to be wiser. We need to be better, as the songwriter said. We need to be all those things, and we can't do it by ourselves. God has to create it in us. He creates it in us by us going forward and doing things imperfectly. We go forward, we make YouTube videos that are not perfect. We go out on the streets and we say things that offend some people. Well, it's going to offend people. I don't care what you say, I don't care what you do, it's going to offend somebody. But the ones who are truly disciples of Christ, their standard is higher anyway. Their standard is Jesus. So they're going to offend people. Jesus offended people. That's why they killed him. But they can't kill him because he always was and always will be. He's no longer in this life physically in terms of that flesh body that was killed on the cross. But he is here in the presence of his people. And according to his word, we are his children. God has given us the power to become the adopted sons of Christ. Adopted children have all the same rights of the biological children. We need to live a life that shows we are disciples of Christ. That means we learn from our mistakes, even though we make them. That's it. That's all God asks from us. He says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Loving your neighbor as yourself is a difficult thing. But if you can't do it, you're not a child of God. If you can't love your neighbor, you're not a child of God, because you have to love them no matter what. That doesn't mean you love their sin. You hate sin. I hate sin. Any sin I've ever done, I hate it. Anybody I've offended, I feel bad. I feel bad when I offend people. I feel bad when I offend them with the righteous word of God. I feel bad. It doesn't stop me from doing it. It doesn't stop me from offending them with the word of God. I can't help it. Because it didn't stop me from offending them with my sin. It didn't stop me from offending God with my sin. It didn't stop me from offending God. When I have a wicked thought, it doesn't stop me from having those thoughts. But you know what? All of those thoughts, God knew I was going to have them. Before the day came, he knew I was going to sin before I sinned. And Jesus called me anyway. And Jesus saved me anyway. And Jesus died for me anyway. So all of those things are done by God.